This is pretty disastrous as far as I can see. You and I both know that cover over Christmas is already stretched incredibly thinly. We now have junior doctors walking out, and they are still demanding a 35% pay increase. In many ways, actually, they've hardened their stance. What are your thoughts on this? Clearly, the public, the ones who pay for them, will suffer.
Well, there's no question it will. And good morning to you both. Yes, it's a nightmare. I mean, what the public don't see, of course, is the administrative chaos that it causes in the run up to the strike. You have to be sure you cancel all the operations on the strike days, which is not that easy because it often involves older people who getting in touch with them. It's not just an email or a text. You have to write to them and make sure they've got the letter. On top of that, you've got to make sure that you clear out the wards on strike days, because the management technique of managing the strikes is to put your resource into the blue light front door, your consultants into the front door to manage that, and to make sure that they're backed up by space on the ward. So if they do have to do an admission, you haven't got people queuing up in the corridors because they just couldn't manage it. So you have to absolutely clear out the wards in case you need them. And then, of course, when the strike is over, you've got to rehabilitate the people you've knocked off the waiting list back onto the waiting list. And so far, over 1 million people have been knocked off the waiting list because of the strikes. And so it's an absolute nightmare. There's a huge risk as well, because although it's true to say that we've got consultant cover on the blue light front door, what we don't really know yet, and it's a longitudinal thing and we will find out, are excess deaths and damage that are caused by people who've been delayed from their admission because people are only on a waiting list and going in for their procedure because they've got a clinical need. And we don't know the extent to which that gets distorted and things get worse for them. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. As for the 35%, I don't think there's anybody in the world who thinks the doctors are going to get a 35% pay rise. They were offered a kind of a bitty part and part deal, which they've been negotiating actually for some time, privately and quietly and out of the public gaze. And it gave them around 12%. When the new Secretary of State came in, it was thought that she'd been put there to kind of tidy up the loose ends that Steve Barclay couldn't manage. She's done a deal, we think, with the consultants, although we're not sure that's out for ballot. I'm hearing that actually there are a lot of consultants that don't think it's enough. But, you know, earning £100,000 a year and going on strike, I don't think the public are going to go for that. As far as the junior doctors are concerned, they said it's not enough and we're going to strike. Now, the thing is this. Here's the important bit. Their strike mandate runs out in January. So they'll strike in January. The NHS is prepared for it. It'll be a struggle. They'll muddle through somehow or other. But then this is the key point. The junior doctors have to ballot again in January to see whether or not they can renew their strike mandate after that. That then will be the deciding point. Will the junior doctors vote to continue striking? Because, and here's the other point, the BMA don't pay strike pay. So the junior doctors will have lost a shed load of money because of the strikes. And I think a lot of them may well say, look, take the 12%, I've had enough.
Well, I also think it will depend on how it plays with the public over the next few days, because striking at this time, and you can tell us from your experience, it's already a massively overstretched system. And Christmas, you come the winter, the cold, the conditions that brings with it, you know, makes things even more complicated. That there may be a point at which sort of the public's appetite to deal with these strikes wanes even more, considering the timing of this latest action.
Yes. That's a very interesting point. I mean, you know, you don't need me to tell you, winter is the worst time of the year for the NHS. Put a strike on top and it just gets, you know, indescribably difficult to manage. But let's think about the public for a moment. There was an RCN poll last week where the public said that they would support nurses going back on strike, because if you remember, the nurses ended their strike in some disarray last year, at the beginning of this year. They settled for 5% at a time when inflation was 8%. They wanted 19%. the nurses said they didn't want to go on strike anymore. So it was left in a kind of very indecisive set of circumstances. There was a YouGov poll last week as well, where the public seemed to support junior doctors in their quest for more money. Whether they actually support 35% increase or not, I don't know. I don't think so. But certainly I don't detect that public support for the doctors is waning, and I think it's slightly about the fact that it's who is impacted by the strikes. There are a lot of people on waiting lists, and a lot of people get turfed off the waiting lists. You know, and in absolute numbers, it's 1 million people. But the extent to which it kind of touches everybody else's life, I think that's a kind of important thing that we've not really understood or explored. If somebody goes on strike, like for example, the railway people went on strike, and that really disrupted a huge number of people, but still they maintain public support. So it seems to me that the public are looking beyond the impact of the strikes and looking at the political infrastructure that they would blame for the strikes occurring. I think this is much more political.
But